Hello and welcome to part 15 of Let's Create a 2D Platformer in the Godot game engine. My name is Colin, and in this tutorial, not so mini series, we're creating this 2D platformer video game. Of course, in this game, you control the player on screen using keys on your keyboard. Of course, you can walk, run, jump, and fall. You can jump on enemies to squash them. You can get hit by enemies and lose lives. You can collect coins to win the game. You can shoot fireballs, do wall jumps. You know how 2D platformer games work. As it stands at our project right now, we have a fairly complete game. My level is not very large, so I need to kind of grow it by adding more tiles to my tile map and by expanding my camera's allowable area that it can travel. But essentially we have a functioning game. We have enemies that can hurt us, we can squash them, we have coins that we can collect, and if we collect all the coins in a level, right now there are only 3, you win the game. But the glaring absence in our game are game menus. That means a main title screen as well as screens that say game over or you lose or you win. So in this video we need to make at least 3 menu screens. Also, we need to select a default scene in our game so that when our game first loads, our game project knows which scene, which screen should be the first thing the player sees when they launch the game. Of course, in our case, our default scene is going to be our game title screen. Of course, this is part 15 of this not so mini series on how to create a 2D platformer game in the Godot game engine. If you've not seen the first 14 videos in this mini series, I'll put a link to this whole playlist containing all of my Godot 3 tutorials up on the screen right now. That'll be a card probably up in the top right corner for you to click and check out if you haven't seen any of the previous parts. But let's go ahead and jump into the Godot editor. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something in it, please go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps out me and my channel, and I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one in the Godot game engine or in Blender or other technology, click on that subscribe button as well, and click that bell icon to be notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. So as it stands at our project right now, well, you know what's going on. We have a character, we have a world, we have coins, and we have enemies. And if I press the play scene button, well, that will launch this scene. But right now, as it stands, and I've been avoiding this for most of all of these videos in this mini series, if you press the play button, well, you get an error. It says that no main scene has ever been defined, select one. So you can select a scene to be the first scene that launches when the game is loaded after you export it into a game project that you can publish. We don't have that scene yet. It's going to be the title screen, so I'm going to press, of course, just the play scene button to see what we have. And as you can see, we've got enemies that you can squash. If you run into the side of the enemy, you get hurt, and the game will reset the game level instead of going to like the game over screen. And if you collect all the coins, well, you win the game. There's only 3 of them right now, and the game just restarts. We need 3 new menu screens. So I'm going to go up to the top to this plus button where you create new scenes. Of course, I'll press plus. To create a new menu screen, you're going to click this user interface button in the scene dock. This creates a new scene or gives this new empty scene a root node that's called a control node. If you recall from the video in which we created the heads up display, the coin counter, this is very similar because this heads up display uses user interface control node elements in the game. If we select our root node in this new scene and press the plus button, all the elements that you're going to be using pretty much on a menu screen are in this control branch of all the possible nodes. The first node that I'm going to add is actually going to be the background of our menu. Our background is going to be a solid color, and for that I'm going to use a color rectangle. So you can search for it. If you type in the search box color, C-O-L-O-R, you're going to find color rect. That's going to be the background again. So I will select that and I will press plus. When you create a new color rectangle, it will be up at the top left corner, hopefully, of your game screen, and you can drag the bottom left corner to make it larger. If you want to make it the exact same size as your game window, well, this will depend how large you made your game window. If you don't recall how large your game window is, in other words, when you go to your game and you press play scene, how large your game window actually is. If you go up to your project menu and go to project settings and then go to the first general tab at the top and scroll down or slide down all the way, that you can see the display category and the window subcategory. Your window size is right here, and the default is 1024 by 600. I'm pointing this out because you can change this and that'll change the size of your game window. But important for us right right now, if I go back to my color rectangle, I can select it over here, go over to the rect category, and I can change its size to match exactly. So 1024 by 600, I believe that was. I don't want the background of my title screen to be white, so I will click on the color picker and choose a better color. I'm going to go for a dark purpley kind of color, something like that. I think I might tweak that a little bit later, maybe a little bit darker than that. I'm going to name this scene. The default name of my root node is control. I'm going to name it the name of this screen. It's going to be title menu. So all one word is best. I will press Control S to save. When you save a scene, of course, it'll end with .tscn and it'll name it the name of your root node of the scene. So title menu right there. I'm good with that. So I will press save right in my res project folder. Next up, I need a big title for my game. And to have text on your screen, you need to put a font file into your game project folder. So on my desktop, I have a couple of folders that I'll be giving you a link to download in the description area below this video on YouTube. It'll be a zip file that you'll need to unzip in order to see these two folders. And in these two folders, I have, in the UI folder, I have a few buttons that you can incorporate somehow into, that's what one looks like. It looks like a little bit of a gradient button looking thing. It's hard to see on the screen right now, and a smaller button. If you recall, in my actual game that you can play right now at borncg.itch.io, this button is incorporated into the screen in one of my two little instruction areas, so you know how to play the game, what you are, what your enemy is, what you're collecting, the coins, and what keys you have to press on your keyboard to play the game. So these are basically user interface elements in the game. In the other folder, in the More Fonts folder, and you'll see why I named it More Fonts in a moment, I've got two fonts, Kiri font and Sniglet regular.ttf. These are, again, font files. I'm not sure if everything that I'm showing you right now in these folders was created by www.kenny.nl. That's where most of my game art is. I believe the UI buttons were, but I'm not sure if I got these fonts from kenny.nl or from fontlibrary.org. So go ahead and check either one of those two sites out if you're looking for more fonts or more game assets. Regardless, you can get all of these files from the description area below this video on YouTube, okay? So I'm going to go into my project folder where I have an assets folder. This is where I already have a fonts folder, so that's why I made the next one called More Fonts. And I'm just going to move or copy the fonts from my More Fonts folder, Control C on my keyboard. I'll click over here, Control V to add them to that folder. And then into my assets folder, I'm going to put my UI folder. Again, this assets folder is optional. I just created it so that I would have a place to put all of the sprites and sounds and font files and things like that. Okay, so I've got my UI folder here and I've added the fonts into my fonts folder. Great. If I go back into the Godot engine, they will be in my assets folder. They might import really quickly, but now I've got more fonts to work with and I've got more UI elements here in a new UI folder. So to create a title for our game, we need to create a label, and that's another one of those control green UI elements. So I'll select the root node of my scene and press plus. I'm going to search for label, and there it is. I will double click. When you create a label, it is really small, and if you have it selected and you type text into the text field over in the inspector doc, then it will be really small. So my game title is going to be really boring. It's going to be platformer game. And as you will see, the text is small and it isn't great looking. So in order to use one of the fonts, well, I need to create a font resource in Godot. With the label selected, I'm going to go down to custom fonts, where right here, you need to create a new font resource. Again, you can't just drag one of the TTF files into there. It won't work. You need to create with this little arrow a new dynamic font. And once you do that, you can click on dynamic font. It'll expand this little subsection out so you can actually edit this resource. And under this resource's font subsection, this is where you can drag the font of your choice. I'm going to try Kiri font and I'll drag that into there. I'll make it a little bit bigger. That's what it looks like right now. Under this dynamic font resources settings is where the font size is, and I can click and type a number in there like 70, and that's what that font looks like. What does Sniglet regular look like? Well, that's what it looks like. Which one do I prefer? I like Kiri font. But let's go ahead and place this somewhere in our game. And of course, if I go to the section just below my dynamic font expanded section called custom colors, this is where you can specify a font color. If you enable it, then you can click in the color picker and pick a font color. I kind of like, I actually kind of like that. If you want to copy the exact same colors of me, for some reason, this color of the text is the hex code 5476FF. So if you type that right into there, you can get the same color as me, and my color rectangle, for those of you who want to do the exact same thing as me, is the hex value 260071. Okay, I'm going to add, I think, a outline to this platformer game text. So I think there is a font outline color, and I think that is right in the dynamic font settings and not the color settings. I'm not sure why. I'll click in there. I think I'll use something that's like an orangey color, and I believe I need to give the outline size an actual size that's bigger than 0, and I kind of like that. If you want to make a subsection, in other words, a panel in your menu that kind of distinguishes itself by having kind of a different boxy background color, well, that is called a panel. So if I select my root node of my scene and I press plus and I do a search for panel, it's right here. I can double click, and as you can see, I get kind of just a rectangle that acts as a container, or could if I gave it children nodes like labels and images and things like that, which I will do. So I will kind of make this be over here. And if I select the panel node and I go over to rectangle, of course, I can change its position and its size. If I want to give it rounded corners, I believe that is under custom styles, where I can give this panel a new style box flat style. And once I do that, I can click on style box flat, and this is where I can choose things like the background color more precisely. So I might make this have a kind of darker bluey or purpley color, and then make it transparent by sliding this alpha value down to make it transparent. And I believe in this style box flat section, there is a corner radius section where I might type in 20 in all 4 of those boxes. So now it kind of has nice rounded corners. I'm going to select that panel node because I'm going to give it children. So I'm going to make it its own kind of branch in our scene. With it selected, I will press plus. I'm going to add now one of those UI buttons that looks like a key on your keyboard, because here I'm going to tell the user what keys do what functions, like jump and walk and run and things like that. So I'm going to actually put little keys here. I can't quite recall what that node is called to put images into the game. So under control, if I scroll down, there is a node called texture rectangle. Now this does pretty much the same job as a sprite in your game, although this texture rectangle is one of the green control user interface nodes, and that's what it's meant for. So you should use this instead of a sprite, which would belong in like the actual game part of a game. Okay, so texture rectangle, there it is. A texture rectangle needs a texture, so I'm going to drag the gray button 4 over into that texture rectangle's texture slot, and there it is. Now, just with these default settings, if I try to scale this, will it work? No, it won't. So a texture rectangle won't kind of scale the texture. I believe I need to check expand, and then it will. And then you can basically do what you want. And in this case, I'm going to press Control Z on my keyboard a few times, so it goes back to the default size and aspect ratio, and then I can click expand. So if I hold Shift and start dragging the corner, it should scale proportionally. I had a few problems with that, so I had to kind of edit that part out of this video. It should work after some finagling, okay? So I'm gonna make this spacebar a little bit smaller, and I've got expand turned on and scale on expand, this mode set to its default. And so now I'll put that down right about there. I'm going to put an actual description on here. So I'm going to put a label in front of this little icon. So I'm going to select my panel. I will press plus and I will search for label. I think you know what's going to happen here. I'm going to speed up this part of the video. Okay, so we have what looks something like a menu. I've gone ahead and added a controls section. This is a panel background, of course, with a mixture of labels for the text and texture rectangles for the graphics. And I've used or repurposed some of the graphics from my actual game to describe what the game objects are over in this item section, which again is a panel. What we are missing though is a play button. So in order to add a button in Godot, we're going to select our title menu, our root node, and I'm going to press plus, and in that category, in that control UI category, there is a category called base button. And if I expand it, there's another subcategory or a sub branch called button, but we're just going to go ahead and add that actual node called button. If you search for button, B-U-T-T-O-N, you'll get a whole bunch, but you'll just be adding the normal one. If I add that, it'll go, of course, up to the top left. I'll make it bigger and drag it over here. Buttons in Godot don't look that great. It's just kind of this gray box with a bit of an outline, maybe a little bit of a rounded corner. It's a gradient, so it blends from a light gray to a dark gray, I think. If we select it and go over to our inspector, we can type text for the button. So I will say play, and there it is. Of course, when you have a font in a button, you need to give it, or text in a button, you need to give it a font, just like with a label there is on a button. If I go over to the inspector, there is a custom font section where we can make a new dynamic font. This is exactly the same as with a label. So I will go under font, and then under my font assets folder. Oh, by the way, I've added, and you would have found these if you downloaded the resources like the buttons and the fonts in the description area below. I went ahead and I added another sprite called arrowup.png because I realized that we didn't actually have the graphic for left and right buttons. This is just a button that points up, but with a texture rectangle, which is how we're adding those graphics, that PNG file. You can go to the, I'll just click on it to select it. You can go to the rect category and you can change the rotation. So you can rotate the arrow to point whichever way that you want. I rotated it -90 and +90 degrees. Okay. So with a button selected, I will make sure it has a font. So in the font section, I will maybe select Kiri font. That looks something like what I want. Maybe I'll make under font settings the font text bigger, maybe 40 or so. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like this gray background. To get rid of it, you can actually just select the button and select flat on right near the top of the inspector, and that will make the button appear flat. I'm not quite sure why they call it that, but that'll get rid of the style and make it look just like text. So now if I actually go and save this scene, Control S to save, and press play scene with this scene, it will actually act like a button. It will be clickable. You'll still get that outline. Maybe we'll touch upon that in a future video, but the button won't do anything yet. We're going to add some custom hover effects though, really quick. So with the button though, I'm going to rename it to play button, and I'm making P and B capitalized, and that might come into play in a moment. You'll see why. So you might want to copy me for the name of that play button, all one word, capital P and B. To make the button change color when the user puts their mouse over the button and when they click on the button, that is actually built in. Those hover effects are built into buttons. I believe it is with the button selected under the custom colors section. And yes, font color hover, and font color pressed. So if I enable font color, of course I can pick a color. Maybe I'll make kind of a green play. That's a greeny yellow kind of a color for play. And then when the user hovers their mouse anywhere over this rectangle section near the button, we want that text to change color. Perhaps I'll maybe make it a pinky color. And then when the user clicks, that's what this pressed state is for, on the button, I'm going to make it red. So if I go and play this scene now and I hover my mouse over this button, it'll turn pink. And if I go out, it'll turn back to its default. And when I'm actually in the middle of clicking, it'll turn red. Okay, so that's what those hover states are for. How do you make a button actually do something? How do you add code to the button? Well, we're going to select our play button and I'm going to add a script to it. So with it selected, I will press the add script button. It's going to want to make a new .gd script file with the same name as that node play button. That's why I recommended that you name it the same as me. If you just left it called button, well, every time you add a different button that does different things, it would want to name itself or the code file button.gd. And so naming the button after what it actually does will help you separate the different code files for different buttons that go to different places. Okay, so play button is a good name. I will press create. When I do that, well, of course, we get an empty script file with just a ready function. We don't need that ready function, so I'll get rid of it. What we do need on this button is the use of a signal and a function. Yes, the way you actually detect if a button is being pressed is you use a signal under the node dock. So if I select the play button and go to the node dock, there are signals that are specific to buttons. And the one that we're going to use is called pressed. So with the button selected, if I double click on pressed, we're going to need to link this signal up to a handling method or a receiver function. We're going to select the actual play button. So the same object that is emitting the signal will handle the signal. It has a script file after all. So we'll select that. The receiver method is going to be called on play button pressed. I like that. It's self-explanatory. We'll select play button and press connect. When I do that, that script file that we just made now has our function that will do whatever code we write right here. Of course, when you press this button, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to switch scenes. So I'm going to say get underscore tree. That's a method call. So we'll put our round brackets or parentheses. And after that, we'll type a dot and we're going to say change underscore scene, the first option. And if you get the prompts here, you can just press enter with the first one selected. And of course, we're going to switch to which scene when you press play? Well, level 1. So I'll select this prompt here. Of course, you know that if you select anything in your file system doc, like a tscn file, I'll collapse my assets. If you select level 1.tscn, you can copy the path right there and paste it in double quotes right there. Okay, so I will save that script file. I'll go back to my 2D workspace. Of course, right now I can press play scene to play this scene and it'll load. And if I press the play button, when I do that, it actually loads the game and I can play the game. Okay, but if I want to set this menu screen as the default scene, so when I finally export this project in a couple videos from now, I should be able to press the play button and it would work. So I will press the play button now. It's telling me no main scene has ever been defined. Select one. You can change it later in project settings under the application category. So I'm going to press select. It's asking me here to select the first scene that we should see when you first load the game. That's going to be, of course, our title menu. So I'll select it right there. I will press open. And so now it'll continue. I press the play button. It launches the game. If I close this game window and just press play now, it now knows the default scene in my game. If you mess up and you accidentally select the wrong scene to be the default scene, or you want to change it later, so when you press play it goes to something else, well, you can go to your project settings, so project menu, project settings, and then under the application, the first tab at the top, general, and then application run, under this run subcategory, your main scene is right here. If you want to clear it, well, you can just press that little circle backward undo arrow button. If you want to set it right here instead of up here by clicking on the plus, you can click on this little folder button and select it here and press open. And hey, that's just as good. I can press close, save, Control S, and I'll press the play button and it does the exact same thing. Okay, so it just works. So now we have a title screen for our game, even though our game is called Platformer Game. So when I play my game, of course it works, except when I lose, I just restart my level. When I hit an enemy or fall off of a cliff, I shouldn't just restart this level. I should go to a you lose or a game over screen. And if I collect all the coins in my game, I should go to a you win screen and not just restart this level. So through the magic of video editing, I'm going to press the plus up here to create a new empty scene. And in a flash forward, I will create a you win and a game over screen in 3, 2, 1. And hey, that was easy. Now I have a game over screen that looks like this. It's very simple. It has a background color that is a color rectangle. It has a big label and a button. Notice how this button says main menu and it's called main menu button, and the script on it, if I actually go to its script, is called main menu button, and it goes to the title menu. Well, this script is a different file, of course, than the button on the title menu, which is the play button, which uses the play button.gdscript. So I've got a game over screen, which looks like this, and a you win screen that looks like this. Now, these are both scenes that are saved in my project, of course, but they are not linked up into my game yet. So you won't actually see you win when you collect all the coins. And when you hit an enemy, you won't go to the game over screen until you actually program that, of course. So I'm going to go back to my level 1 scene, and I'm going to go to my enemy script. We'll handle the game over screen first. So if I look at my enemy script, and I'm going to zoom out on this a little bit, and maybe I'll make this workspace full screen so you can see more code at the same time. If I actually look through my enemy script, though, I've got lots of code that has to do with collision with my player, but it turns out that my player itself has the code to switch scenes. So if I go to Steve's script and I look for, I believe it is the on timer timeout function here, that is the timer that runs and then runs out. When you get hit, you turn red, of course. When you hit an enemy, you'll jump back and turn red. That is the ouch function. But then the timer starts. That is a part of Steve. Steve has if I look in Steve's scene, Steve has a timer. Well, once the timer runs out, that's when you are getting the tree of your project. I'll zoom in so you can see that a bit more. And you are changing the scene. Instead of changing to level 1, I'm going to change my scene to the game over screen. So I will select game over.tscn over here, copy the path, Control C, paste it in place of this level 1.tscn, and now that should work for all of my enemies. Likewise, if I go up on Steve's code to the section called on fall zone body entered, well, this is pretty self-explanatory. This is the code that changes your scene when you enter that fall zone, when you fall into the abyss. So I'm going to paste the same path to the game over screen right here. So if I save Steve's code and I go back to, in fact, I don't have to switch scenes anymore. I can just press the play button. I don't have to press the play scene button anymore. And if I press play now, and if I hit an enemy, I will jump back and then I will go to the game over screen. I can go back to my main menu. I can see the controls. If I'm confused about the controls of the game, I can see the items to remind me who I am and what I'm trying to avoid and what I'm trying to do in the game. So I'll press play again. This time I'm going to make the mistake of jumping off the cliff and going into the abyss, as I'm sure some players make that mistake, usually by accident. There we go, game over, that works. What about winning the game? Well, in my game, you have, I'll go back to my 2D workspace, you have a coin counter that this item actually keeps track of how many coins you have collected, and it determines if you win the game. So if I go to my heads up display, that's basically this panel, and I go to its script, you can see that I have a physics process delta that's 60 times per second. It checks to see if the coins is equal to 3, then it'll change the scene. Basically, if you collect all the coins, you go to level 1. Right now, we're going to change that, of course, to go to the you win screen. So I'll select it down here. I'll select my path to that file. I'll paste it here. Now this, as I pointed out when we made the coin counter in a previous video, is not a very efficient way of running this code. Basically, right now I'm checking 60 times per second if I've collected all 3 coins in my game. That's really not efficient to always be checking that 60 times per second. So instead of having this physics process delta function with this checker, which is a good piece of code, I'm going to cut that, Control X on my keyboard, out of the game loop, out of physics process delta, and paste it right in my on coin collected. So every time I collect a coin, it's going to add 1 to my coin number, my coin variable. It's going to update that coin value on the screen so the user can see how many coins they've collected. And every time they collect a coin, that's a good time to check if their new amount of coins is equal to 3. And if it is, then you can change the scene. So now I don't need this physics process delta anymore because there's no code in it. In fact, if you just left it like that without a pass in there, it would actually, I believe, error or cause your game to crash, or it wouldn't compile. So get rid of that. You don't need it. Okay, so that should be it. If I do a Control S to save and I go and press my play button, I get my game title screen. I can press play. If I collect all the coins in my game, I should win. If I hit an enemy or I fall off of a cliff, of course, I go to the game over screen. Okay, so that is how to create menus and buttons and a title screen instead of default scene in your game, and creating a game over and you win screen and implementing those screens in your game. That will be it for this video. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something in it, please go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps with me and my channel, and I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one in the Godot game engine or in Blender or other technology, click on that subscribe button as well, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. Check out my Facebook page and my Instagram page. On those two pages, I post sneak peeks and previews of what I'm working on next, and that's where I communicate with you guys the most. But that'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.